I'd like to call our work session back to order. Mr. Linden, will you please read us out of closed?
Yes, Madam Chair. I move that the Roanoke County School Board come out of closed session for the following: for consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members pertaining to actual or probable litigation, and consultation with legal counsel regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel pursuant to 2.2-3711A7 of the Code of Virginia, and to certify that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under this chapter, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the meeting by the school board.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Item 2.03, action from closed, we do not have any. Item 3.01, approval of personnel changes. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Item 4.01, major construction project updates. Mr. Todd Kegels.
Madam Chair, members of the board, we have with us, as usual, Eric Burkholder and Kamal Khalil from Skanska, our third-party construction managers, and they're going to give us updates on our major construction projects. Eric.
Yep. So we'll go over the past and current activities and some project photos. So at CTE, as you can imagine, the snow's hampered a little bit of our site work. That's just outside the building. We do have temporary heat inside the building, so it's kept moving forward, but on the site work has hampered down a little bit. Since the last update, we have been able to get some stuff done earlier in January. So we got some curbs and gutters on the east side poured. We poured the concrete pad for the drill pad. We cut the north side down to subgrade, and we got some light posts installed on the east parking lot, and we did get the transformer and the primary wires for it pulled into the building. Area D construction, they dropped GRDs, which, if you're not familiar with that, is grills, registers, and diffusers. That's part of the heating and cooling system. Installed some vinyl composite tile, started the epoxy in the restrooms, sealed the concrete in the shop areas, and the real important thing is we got the final connections to the switch gears installed. And we finished up the fire pump and the risers in the sprinkler room. Area A, they did start installing some metal panels on the exterior right there at the entrance. It's looking really nice. They finished pulling all the low voltage wire in that area. We did start dropping sprinkler heads, drop lights, and again GRDs in that area. And they finished the level 5 slope ceiling in the commons area. It turned out to look really nice too. I'll just combine areas B and C because it's pretty much the same stuff going on. They poured the concrete steps and the mezzanines. They continue to do the roof coping and installed a lot of gypsum wallboard, which is drywall. A lot of heavy MEP, which is mechanical, electrical, and plumbing in those two areas. And they've been working on drying in the exterior canopies and completing priming and painting in the shop areas. So we'll go into some of the update photos. So that is a light post. Well, we labeled a light post, but it's actually a light bollard. You'll have a light post that sits on top of that. But that anchors you into the ground. And of course, they're continuing to try to get the water line up to the existing building. Masonry work, they call that sticky stone. There's a better photo of it later on. And they're in the commons area, they're installing some gypsum wallboard. Like I said, we're undercutting the north side in preparation to build our base and then to put down the paving in that area. If you look to the right or left of the window frames, that is the sticky stone. It turned out, it's really nice looking. So, there's them pouring the drill pad and the concrete steps, of course, being poured. the VCT is installed in a lot of area B. They did clean up that area. You can see it's a little dirty, but they did clean up that area and put down a protective coating or protective layer on it so it don't get destroyed during construction. And then of course there's some curbs being poured. A little bit of electrical conduit that's in area B, and of course they're finishing some gypsum wallboard in area C. Anybody got any questions? That's the major updates for CTE.
Looks good.
Yeah, it's looking great. It's amazing so much has gotten done so fast.
Yeah, it'll be a very nice looking building. I like the way it sits up on that hill and the grand entrance. It'll look nice.
Todd, would it be something we, towards the end of the month or first of the month, we could do another walkthrough? Everybody
Anytime
just
you'd like.
It's been a while.
Love to take you up there.
Yeah,
When we took, I think Mr. Linden was there, along with some folks from Korea, and we had to traverse unfinished stairs and things like that. But those are finished. There's just since the time we were there, there's paint on the walls, VCT, the floor tiles are down in that area, ceiling grid and all that stuff going in. I mean, it's exciting because now it looks, it's starting to look like what it's going to look like when it's finished. So, yeah, happy to take you up there anytime.
Bring mud boots.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's gonna be that way for a while, I believe.
Good afternoon. I'll try to make it sweet and short. On the two schools, Condev, we have two phases going on. Phase 3A, which is the bottom part, and they're calling the library section Phase 2B, and I don't want to go into that, but I like to call them this way. This is much easier to follow. In Phase 3A, the bottom part, there's a lot of work going on. We finished the sanitary underground piping and we covered it up with concrete. We did the overhead pipe, like copper pipe for the cool water and the hot water. Plus the HVAC system is almost done. Overhead sprinkler is also almost done. In-wall and overhead flex conduit and junction boxes for the electrical section, that's almost done also. The switchgear, we have a lot of work. That might take maybe another 4 weeks or so. But the switchgear, like it's a lot of work. So we're not behind, but we're doing good. Concrete blocks, they started like 2 weeks ago, and we're almost done on the bottom, like lower level. We'll probably be moving up ahead in the next week or so. Steel framing is almost done on the lower part. On the library section, that's upstairs. We got overhead copper piping also for the hot water and cold water. HVAC system, overhead sprinklers, framing. It's kind of the same work in a way. Drywall, windows, door frames, plus the framing. Outside, we did the pad and we set up the transformer on it. That's all done. All the conduit is perfectly done. I mean, we just waiting on the inside switchgear to be done. Same thing on Glen Cove. We got the lower level, the 3A, phase 3A. Sanitary piping, that's also covered up. We got overhead copper pipe for hot and cold water. HVAC system, sprinklers done, like 90%, maybe 80% done. The same in wall, receptacles or flex conduit. Even the wires pulled, and even the junction boxes up on top and the walls. Block wall also started. We're almost done, maybe 80-85% done. The shear footing that was done maybe 2 weeks ago, but today I just came also from there, and they were doing the block next to these two columns. Framing is almost done, probably also 85% done. On the upper level, the library section, we have overhead copper piping. It's almost the same activities. That's why it's kind of like boring, but It's the same activities and same tasks. On the upper level, the library section also, I called it the same thing, so you can follow it better. Framing, drywall, windows, doors, all that's in the works. Probably 85% done. And on the transformer side here at Glen Cove, they might have an issue because of the pipe in the transformer. It's probably got so much rust in it they can't reuse it. So they might have to do it from a different way. We'll see. We'll wait to see what they're gonna do. That's the transformer pad and the transformer sitting on it. I don't know if you can see it, but on the left hand side, that's the sanitary pipe, like we covered up with. Covered up with mud, which is concrete. That's the door frames and the framing on the left hand side, and some junction boxes up on top of the ceiling, and plus flex conduit. Some sprinkler work, and that's the switching. You can imagine that how much work is that on the right hand side. That's still going on. And that's also covering up on Glen Cove, covering up the sanitary piping, and they started the block wall, which is almost probably finished by now. This is like 4 or 5 days ago. Today they're also on the left hand side for the cooling tower. We're installing insulation for the pipe so it doesn't burst, and a lot of framing going on also. That's on top. The upper level, the library section. Same thing here, drywall, finishing, and framing. That's pretty much it. Any questions? I know it keeps like repeating, but to us, when we see it finished, we like it. So.
Any questions?
Looking good.
Thank you.
That looks great.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Item 4.02, minor construction project updates, Mr. Todd Kegels.
Madam Chair, members of the board, we just have a few updates this evening on some stuff we have been able to accomplish in between plowing snow and doing all the things we've had to do over the last couple of weeks. Out at Hidden Valley Middle School, we're still set for spring break for the third phase of that ceiling and LED lighting replacement. You guys have seen the phase 1, phase 2 pictures. Phase 3 is on track to start over spring break. Out at Fort Lewis, the board did pay for that sign. Remember, this is the cooling tower. We extended the brick wall all the way up to cover the cooling tower, and then the board did pay for the entry sign. That's actually a nice size sign. It just looks small because that's a large brick wall now that you have that extension on there. And so this is done. This project's done, except we'll come back when the weather warms up and we'll pressure wash those capstones at the top to make sure that they look good. But otherwise, that project is complete and it looks great. Glenville Elementary School, we've got those restrooms, but that's a summer project. Cave Spring High School, we're renovating the snack bar out there. All the interior demolition is complete. The electrical service upgrade is complete. The block work for the service window height adjustment, remember we raised those windows to make them more functional. That's been completed. The furring out of the walls and the drywall, we've actually painted as of yesterday. And the new equipment is on order. Some of it's already here, actually, down in the warehouse. That's just before they finish the drywall, and you can kind of see what a nice job they did framing everything out and making everything look good there. So they're coming right along. We were actually just picking paint colors and laminate colors for the cabinets this week. That'll be our holdup now. The laminate for the custom cabinets will take 6 weeks or so to get cabinets, and the guys will move on during that time, do some other things, and then come back to the snack bar when the cabinets are ready. Out at Northside High School, the new stadium lights are finished. That's the first night that they turned them on out there. They look great. Like, the difference that it's made in the way the stadium looks is amazing. I mean, it makes that field pop, just the colors and everything that are that you can see now that I really wish we had a before and an after, because, this just looks like a lit up field. But if you could see the before picture, you'd really appreciate what a difference that makes in that stadium out there. And just a reminder to the board, so when we did the lighting study, we checked all 4 stadiums, and at the time, Cave Spring was the best, William Byrd was the worst. We replaced the lights at William Byrd. The next worst was Northside High School. We replaced that now. And then Glenver High School was the next one. Cave Spring had a newer, non-LED, but a newer system, and so their lights were pretty good. So that's just a nugget for the board to start thinking about whether or not we want to also do the lighting upgrade at Glenver that we did at the other stadiums. That's just what the new poles, lights, and the electrical switch gear looks like over there. If you had seen it before, you'd see what a big difference in appearance all of that stuff is going to make as well. The electrical stuff that was out there before was way antiquated and added on to sort of piecemeal, and looks fantastic. The stadium looks great. Out at Hidden Valley High School, they finished the pad. They were compacting it in that photo there. That's just another closer up picture of them doing the compaction, and then they actually started rolling out the turf. So those guys they were working up until the Friday that it snowed, getting the turf rolled out and that kind of thing. And of course now it's all buried under, still 6 inches of snow and ice, so work's come to a stop. But they are right on track to get done by end of February, mid-March, if the weather will help us, which it looks like starting next week it probably is. They're right on track. They're doing a fantastic job of knocking that out. And then the last one we have is the softball field out at Byrd Middle. We're expecting the final set of engineered plans actually tomorrow, and then we'll be able to start pricing out the grade work and the fencing and those things. That's all I have. Do we have any questions about any of those projects or any other projects that aren't on there? All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Todd.
Item 4.03, review of calendar updates. Ms. Tammy Newcomb.
Okay, good afternoon. In front of you, I've put the 25, 26, 26, 27, and 27, 28 calendar. First, I would like for you to look at the top calendar, which is the 25, 26 calendar. We are requesting approval to move the early dismissal currently scheduled for April 22nd to April 21st. The original April 22nd early dismissal conflicts with the Little Feet Meet, which is being held that day on Roanoke College. And this event involves a significant number of our students and staff and families, and an early dismissal on that day would create logistical challenges related to transportation, supervision, and participation. So by shifting the early dismissal to April 21st, we can better support student participation in the Little Feet Meet. Also, there is a possibility of a special election on April 21st, which would mean our schools would have to be closed. And if that's the case, then we've already scheduled the 21st to be a day that's different, which would have been an early dismissal. So we could make that a full day, teacher work day, and also give us the opportunity for the middle school to still do their student-led conferences. So we would request if everyone's in agreement that we could put that on the consent agenda for the next meeting.
I support that. The Little Feet Meet is a great event.
It is.
I've been going for years. It's awesome.
And Roanoke College doesn't release that date before we do the calendar, so we had just gotten that information.
So the 21st we would be closed though, right?
No, right now it'll still be an early dismissal day,
Don't
so
we
we're
already
just
know the
shifting it.
Right, what she's suggesting is we've got to move the early dismissal anyway off 22nd. Originally, we were going to move it to the 23rd, but now that we know the possibility of the 21st, go ahead and move it to the 21st. But yes,
We kind of know the answer to that
if
though,
we,
right?
well, but it's held up in the courts then.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So if the courts rule that, hey, you can't do that, then they won't have the election.
Okay.
But we'll still
got
keep it as an early dismissal. But
it's a possibility that we
If
would.
not, we'll go ahead and close that day. So
Yeah.
it'll be on that same day versus having these 2 different days in play.
Okay,
Mhm.
I got you.
And then if you look at the 26-27 calendar, we needed to do adjustments to that calendar in order to align with the teacher contract, which is a requirement of 200 working days. The current calendar reflects 202 teacher work days. So to address this discrepancy, we would like to take the parent-teacher conference day, be moved to March 15th, which actually aligns better with our end of the 9 weeks, instead of February 8th, and then make February 8th actually a school closed day, which would add back one of the days that were over. And then March 29th, have that as a closed day also, and also for Easter holiday. That would give the 2 days from 202 to 200. And that these adjustments bring the calendar into compliance with the contract of 200 day, which is required. And then the last calendar is the calendar for 27-28, just as the first draft. It does mirror the other 2 calendars that we have in place currently. Also would like to just keep you updated about snow days. Jamie does a great job of keeping up this spreadsheet of where our days are in time. And right now we're still at 7 days of bank days. And that includes like the days that are listed as makeup days, but we say all of them are bank days. The only discrepancy would be Burlington has 2 hours less than the other schools because they had to get out of school early one day due to power outage. But I still think we're in a pretty good spot unless we have more weather. So
just to clarify, you have to have 990 hours. So back in the day, you had to have 180 days. But so now if you calculate it by hours, we have a total of about 7 days left.
Yeah.
Before we'd have to make it up to get to the 990 hours. And it's usually elementary that is the barrier because of the shorter day.
But we did extend that day a couple years ago, so that has helped us out tremendously. So
we
any
add this
questions?
to consent?
Well, if everyone agrees for the 25-26, and then the changes we did for 26, 27, 28, yes.
Is it with that?
Well, it's me.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Item 4.04, request to accept awards and appropriate funds, Ms. Susan Peterson.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. We have received 2 awards since I last brought an award to you, and it is our typical board policy. Any unbudgeted award comes to you for approval of acceptance, and then we have a special projects grant contingency from which we can appropriate the funds. We have enough to cover both of these awards, so we do not have to go to the Board of Supervisors because this is not going to increase our budget overall. The first item was $12,500 of donations to construct teacher picnic areas for the Vinton schools. So that'll be William Byrd High, Middle, Herman L. Horn, W. Cundiff, and Mount Pleasant elementary schools. It'll be $2,500 appropriated to each of those schools for picnic areas for teacher appreciation. The other one is a $14,800 VDOE mathematics grant. This will help us expand mathematics endorsements for our middle school teachers by providing funds for teachers to take the practice exam and for special tutoring to help these teachers as well. And so if approved by the school board, what we will request is that at the next meeting on February 19th, we roll this to consent agenda to accept both awards and appropriate the funds from grant special projects. Thank you.
You guys want me to move over there or just pull my cord?
Whichever you want to do.
It's not going to consent also.
Yes. Item 4.05, review committee report to explore the possibility of student random drug testing. Dr. Jamie Soltis.
Trying to get out of this, sorry. Thank you, Chuck. Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you for allowing me to report back from the committee that was asked by the board to be formed to explore the possibility of student random drug testing. I will say that I appreciate everybody who participated on the committee. Everybody was super actively engaged. Everybody was definitely not scared to share feedback, and I appreciate all those people. So just to get started, here was the representative sample from our committee. So I kind of chaired the committee. Ms. Green, who's the high school principal at Northside, Lindsay O'Brien, who's both a teacher and a coach, Nathan Hungate, who's a parent and a former college athlete and a Roanoke County athlete, Jason Murray, who's the high school AP. He's also been a high school athletic director and a coach at the middle and high school levels. Kendra Ermel is a parent. Jacob Gruss is a current teacher and coach in the county. Kevin Tuck is a teacher and coach in the county. Heather Stevens is a parent. Allison Thornton is the current middle school AP and AD, because at the middle school level an AP serves as the AD generally. Neil Zimmerman, who is a fantastic athlete in Roanoke County as well and is a parent. Miss Fiona Hill, who's a middle school principal. And then Taylor, aka Baby Gruss, was a student who is on the SAC but is also an athlete. So had a pretty good wide representation. So the first thing I did with the committee is I went over what their actual purpose was, and their purpose was to review the why. Like, why would we even want to consider this? Is it aligned to our sea change framework? Because everything we do from the budget on back should lead back to helping us accomplish our mission and vision, which you can't do unless the parameters of the sea change framework are in place. Then I asked them to review some background information with me, to review the legality, review what research was available for us, and there's not a whole lot, and you'll see that, and then gather information from school districts who are currently or who have implemented student random drug testing in their divisions. And then, to honestly, after we consider all that, make a recommendation to the board. And if the committee came to the conclusion of yes, make some logistical recommendations as well as to how it should be, how it should go, full-fledged, pilot, how many should we test, who we should test, and make those recommendations. So, in looking at the alignment to our sea change framework, the committee did decide that it would help promote a safer, healthier environment by focusing on, hopefully, deterring drug use and supporting students who may have an issue. Everyone agreed there's no safe level of drug use has ever been established. And then at that age, any measurable amount of mind-altering drug or alcohol in a person's body could cause some degree of impairment, even if that impairment's not readily apparent to the layman or the coach or whoever. So when we thought about this, though, we had some goals that we came up with, and that was to foster a safe and supportive environment where students can thrive academically, physically, and socially. And our commitment is to help students make healthy choices that enhance their potential for success in both school and life. And then lastly, it's not, everyone agreed that the purpose of it should not be to be punitive. It should be to identify kids who are maybe struggling with it or who may be starting to dabble, and to provide resources for them. The therapeutic part was a huge focus of the committee. So the first thing we looked at, was it legal? And the short answer is yes. The Supreme Court has ruled on these. It is yes, because you can do it for extracurricular activities, because you can't do it for all kids in school, because the ability to go to school is a property right. And you can test extracurriculars because they're basically not a property right. It's a choice. And then the fact that the athletes had the opportunity to receive assessments and rehabilitative services and not face school punishment was good. And then the fact that the other thing that was tested was, well, what if they refuse to take the test? Could that count as a positive? And it was ruled that that is true, that yes, if you refuse to take the test and you're participating in the extracurricular, then you can give a consequence, and that does not abridge their property right because they're still able to come to school. All right. So the next thing we did is we looked at some data sources that we had to see if we currently had a problem. So we looked at the youth risk behavior data that is shared with us traditionally by Nancy Hans. I think it's every other year. Is that correct, Sean? And Sean, vape data, which we now have vape detectors. So we're have probably more accurate data than we did prior to the detectors when people were just kind of like catching discipline before the video cameras. And then lastly, just overall discipline data of what we're seeing in the schools with what comes up here to our DRT committee and what's been getting referred to the school board. So all in all, our YRBS data said that high school and middle school students report decreases in alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, dabbing, and prescription drug use if you look at the longitudinal data from 2014 to 24. So the survey would indicate we actually have less usage. Doesn't mean we don't have any, but less usage. Then the discipline data indicated an increase in the number of students who are second and third time SAP or SAP contract violators. And we've seen that even through closed sessions and through the number of DRTs that we're seeing where young people are being caught the second and third time, even after having been at a step and then going back to their regular school. And then lastly, and this is data that obviously in 2021-22, when we had 106 vape-related incidents, we didn't have the detectors. And now this past year, now these are incidents that resulted in a consequence. This is not like the detector just went off. You actually caught the kid with it or could prove that he had it. So it jumped up to 243 in 2024-2025. So me just being a generalist, I don't necessarily think you can say it's worse, but we definitely still have kids using vapes.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
That last one.
Yes, sir.
Is vaping, is that just, I mean, is it non-narcotic type substance?
So that would be, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Newcomb, but that would be all of them, whether it be the tobacco vape or it be the THC vapes. So. Right.
Okay.
And then if you move through, the next thing we wanted to do was find any research we could, which I'll be honest with you, there's a paucity of research in this area. We found 3 articles, and I actually had a professor at Radford helping me try to find articles because he had access to systems I don't necessarily have on the effectiveness of student random drug testing. So I did link, and it's tiny, really small, but for anybody who would want to look up the actual 3 articles on the bottom of the slide. But the first research article that we looked at in reading the abstract and going through the article, so what we did is we broke up into groups and shared the articles, and we read, and then we kind of discussed what were the main points we're seeing from this, right? Which you're reading research articles, and unless you're kind of used to reading research articles, they're not exactly the easiest things in the world to read. But the first article basically said that it kind of does show promise in reducing illicit substance use among high school students. There was less drug use at the schools with student random drug testing than there were at the schools without. But the impacts of the study were measured for only 1 year, and it may not represent longer term effects. And the other thing I would say about the research articles are they were older than what we would typically use because there hasn't been a whole lot of new research. So then research article number 2 we looked at was from the American Academy of Pediatrics, and if I'm not mistaken, and I'm doing this off my brain, so it might not be exactly right, but I think it was 2021 that they actually looked at this again. Is that correct? And basically they say they don't support it as much, and the reason they don't support it as much is because there's not a whole lot of good research out there that proves the overall effectiveness. It basically says they have more research that backs education and educational programs across the board reducing it than student random drug testing. They're not saying it doesn't work. They're just saying there's not a whole lot of evidence, and there's apparently been a lot more studies with research on education programs. And then research article number 3 basically said there are no strong conclusions can be drawn. However, there is evidence of lower marijuana use in the presence of a student random drug testing. And then I think it was in that article as well. It basically said the kids that knew they were going to get tested, there was decreases in there, but there was no impact necessarily on the overall general population. I believe that's what it was. Yeah. Which you could make the assumption then, well, then maybe it does deter. But that's just my
That's one of
assumption.
those situations you can't prove cause and
Right,
effect.
it's-
This
right.
caused that to happen,
Right.
but there's a
Could be a correlation,
correlation.
but not a causation.
There is something in that.
All right. So Dr. Nicely was used his connections in our region 6 and other school divisions across the state and kind of just asked who has a program and who doesn't. So these are the ones that responded. Some people were asking like, why would a local division not be on here? Well, it could be they just didn't respond to the email. So the ones we found that did is Botetourt County started it back up this year, as I'm sure you guys were aware. They had it before and then they cut it. I don't know the reason for them cutting it, whether it was drug testing. Cost or the cost return on investment. I can't answer that question. I can tell you that in talking with people over there, one of the reasons they wanted to start it back is because they were seeing an increase in the number of kids under the influence who were also involved in extracurriculars, whether it be driving or participating in a non-required graduation thing. Salem, yes, I think they started theirs in like 2008, and for a long time they did survey the students and ask, do you think it's effective? Did you choose not to participate because of, and all their results were always on the good side. So then they stopped surveying a few years back, but they still stand behind theirs. Pulaski, it says stopped on July 23rd, 2025. They had it and actually found the newspaper article where they had only caught like 30 kids over a 10-year period. And so they decided it wasn't worth their while. And understand a lot of these things are determined by the quality of the test you have, the quality of the testing company you have. So those things can happen. And then Scott County replied yes. And then when I reached out to the person who was doing it, he said, well, I'm going to be honest with you. We still have it like as part of our thing, but we haven't actually tested anybody since COVID. So that was why that had an asterisk in the original PowerPoint, but some stakeholders pointed that out, so I wanted to explain why. So the next thing we did is we wanted to review costs. So we looked at what if we did 10% of the population of the athletes, or I'm saying athletes, but extracurricular participants, or 20%. And then we also looked at including steroids or no steroid testing. And then we looked at, okay, do we want to include students who purchase a parking pass versus not including students who purchase a parking pass? Because all the divisions we talked to, they all had very similar protocols, but like who they tested and how many they tested was not the same. I think Botetourt was the only one that was actually testing student drivers. So, and we looked at this based on an estimate of, I had reached out to a company who's doing the testing for several of these divisions, and it's basically was about $95 a test if we didn't include steroids, and it was about $201 a test if we did include, I'm saying steroids, but performance enhancing drugs. And then there's an annual $200 fee per school to administer the program, and then there's a $100 setup fee each time they perform a test at the school.
Hold on, 95. I'm sorry, David. Go ahead.
Can you go over those numbers again?
That's what I was going to say. $95 per test per student.
It's about
Versus if you did
$95
the-
a test.
Wow.
And then the performance enhancing, if you include that, it's $201 a test. So the way I came up with the cost is I had asked all the ADs to share with me and all the principals to share with me parking passes that had been purchased to compile the numbers, and I based the estimate off of the participation numbers and the parking numbers to kind of figure out what the total cost would be. So the total cost, what we came up with, and I don't have all the numbers in front of me, but the 10% without steroids is about $53,000. And that's we don't ever want school personnel touching the samples. We want to make sure that the company's coming in, the companies, are the ones making sure it's that kid using the restroom. They seal it up. They take a backup sample in case a parent wants to appeal. So school personnel never touch it. And that's important because we don't want to be the responsible one for somebody saying we tampered with anything. So it would have to be a credentialed testing company such as Intercept to do this. So the next thing we did is, after we did all this, we wanted to get some feedback from students. And I give Baby Gruce the credit for this because he's like, why don't we run this by the SAC? Which was a great idea, right? You got a group of kids, a lot of them play sports, some of them don't. So what the SAC feedback was 27 out of 28 members shared that they supported student random drug testing. Qualitative data comments came out, amongst the group of, well, might not even have X sport team because of the kids that are using. Some of that's speculation on their part, I'm sure. Some of that, they probably know one or two kids and they jump to conclusions, but then some of that may be actual true. I mean, I don't know. The SAC was split on should we test drivers. It was 17 to 11. So that's kind of definitely they weren't certain on whether we should do that. The biggest thing, well, two of the biggest things they said is steroids were not necessary. Like, they don't see a whole lot of performance enhancing drug usage, at least from their mind. And I gave you guys my anecdotal evidence if I haven't seen anybody who it looks like they're on it. But no offense to anybody out there. And then the other thing that they consistently came through in their feedback is they are all about this program as long as it doesn't have a negative impact on the budget, which that was just their lens. They wanted to make sure it didn't take away from something that they cared about. And I don't mean they don't care about drug testing, but like that we cut something that they wanted. So the other way we got feedback is the committee, there's a lot of pressure in there to vote all looking at each other, right? So they had no problem discussing each other, but we made sure we gave anonymous feedback loops through surveys to determine whether or not they agreed or disagreed. And the last survey we gave that said they recommended moving forward was 7 to 10. I don't know who said yes, and I don't know who said no on the committee. But since 7 did, that was the majority.
7 of 10.
7 of 10. Did I say
Right,
7 did?
7
10
to
didn't?
10.
I'm sorry. 7 out of 10 who responded said, yes, we should move forward. So from there were several who were vocal about, I think yes, but with some conditions. And some of those conditions were making sure we had strong therapeutic support for the kids, which was pretty universal. Everybody wanted that. And number 2, there was debates on the consequences that would be there. And there were some who thought the first time it should be more focused on therapy and less on missing the games and missing the practices. And then there were some that didn't think that would send the message. So you got everybody's different viewpoints coming in, right? So I compiled all the conditions, moved it ahead to the committee to say, okay, basically the majority are saying we want it. So if I'm going to present this to the board, can y'all come up to some consensus recommendations that would then everybody who's we're saying yes supports yes. So moving on through that, here were the committee recommendations. They honestly want to see if it works. So they wanted to see a pilot. And they wanted that pilot to be as least disruptive as possible with still having enough people participating to where they felt like they could get accurate data to determine whether or not at least the kids, because they want to see a survey with the kids basically being asked, does this, the fact we have this program, help support you in your ability to say no or to not try it, deterrent. They also said they wanted a really strong communication plan out to parents on what would be tested, how often things would be tested, what were the consequences, basically laying the whole program out before the start of the fall season if we went in the fall. And then any other additional data we could collect, which would be things like how many kids were positive, how effective do we think the therapeutic sessions were, things of that nature. So they suggested we do 10% of high school only, starting at high school. who chose to participate in athletics and or VHSL sanctioned competitive extracurricular activities not required by the Board of Education for graduation. So that's going to be your basketballs, that's going to be football, baseball. That's also going to be things like the academic bowl team, and things like that. So, but we cannot, this is just their recommendations. We can change that.
Does that include band or choir stuff?
So band is, that one would be a no.
That's more co-curricular.
Yeah, because that's more co-curricular. CTE, like Skills USA and things like that, they're kind of co-curricular because you're required, if you offer the welding, you're required to have a CTSO, which is a career teacher student organization, where those kids have to have the opportunity to be a part of that organization and compete.
Okay.
So to me, that's a gray area of co-curricular, right?
What, just because some people might be asking, so the sports piece is obvious, and you mentioned other things that are VHSL related that are not co-curricular. We do have other clubs that aren't co-curricular. Would you envision including those, or
No, sir.
okay, I'm thinking like Spanish club?
Yeah, no, we wouldn't test the Spanish club or the French club or the whatever club.
These
These
are
would
not
be
connected to a class,
and they're not
directly.
collected to a class, and they're not really a VHSL sponsored activity. All right. And the other thing, though, they said is, well, we think you should start at the high school, but and I was not even in here when they did this recommendation. Ms. Green took over this part for me, so because I didn't want my influence. They did believe that 8th graders, if they were participating on a JV team, they're part of the high school sports team, they should be tested. They would only be tested during their participation season. Students become eligible upon a return of a signed consent form, so parents would have to sign a consent form. They cannot participate on that activity, though, if we're requiring it until they turn in that form. So you couldn't have Mr. Linden, whose parent is refusing to let him participate in that playing basketball, while Mr. Hudson's parents have signed it and he's playing basketball. Until you returned it, if you guys adopt this, it would be you can't play unless you return it. Also, you would remain eligible from the submission of the signed consent form through the last day of the activity. And then we would develop protocols for students with prescription drugs and over-the-counter medications, and we would work with whatever testing company we went with to determine what would those protocols be. It could be the medical review officer actually calling the parent, not to pick on Miss Clemens, but let's say Miss Clemens was on ADHD medication and she tested positive. Would it be the medical review officer that calls her parents and says, hey, can you verify that so-and-so's on ADHD medicine, that your son or daughter? Because over-the-counter will sometimes test you positive. Now, the good thing is, in my experience in doing these things, even like an everything bagel with the poppy seeds, the tests are so sensitive, it will flag you, but the medical review officers are really good at looking at, okay, what the level is and what is the odds of that actually being a narcotic versus it being, I ate an everything bagel for breakfast. And then the other thing they asked is that we do is the best of our abilities to maintain confidentiality, that we followed Virginia Code. And basically what we've come up with is the only people who would be knowledgeable of this would be the student, obviously, the parent, and the designated school officials. And if I'm you, I'm asking, well, who is that? Well, the coach is going to have to know, right? Because you're going to have to tell a kid it can't play, if that's one of the consequences. The principal's going to need to know, and the athletic director. And then basically you have the meeting. And if it would be Ms. Newcomb or whoever would oversee the program, because at the end of all this, you'll see that once the kid graduates, you shred all this. This doesn't go in anybody's student record at all. All right. They also said that they would want to follow very strict protocols and procedures for testing. They wanted it to be random selection. They wanted it to be administered and conducted by a certified third-party testing agency, and that's real important to me as well. I don't want anybody being able to accuse any of our staff of tampering with samples or anything. It would be coordinated by our Executive Director of Administration, the esteemed Ms. Newcomb, as well as high school administrators, athletic directors, they would work out whoever would be actually physically getting the kids in the building at the school for the testing. Testing would take place at the school in a secure location. So I can tell you that usually what happens is the testing company comes in, they dip dye in the toilet so that a kid can't just, dip out of the toilet water. And they don't stand there and watch it, but they kind of observe them without being like right up on them. What we would test for would be alcohol, nicotine, THC, synthetic cannabinoids, opiates, cocaine, methamphetamines, and any other substance defined as a controlled substance by either Virginia or federal law, which is pretty standard, minus the performance-enhancing drugs. And then who would analyze it would be the medical review officer who works for either independent that like a testing company sends it to, or is an employee, is a physician employed by the agency. So then, I know I'm giving you a lot of information quick, so stop me at any time if you have questions. So the first offense for a positive result, what the group was recommending is that they would be suspended for the next event or game, but we would still let the kid practice and dress out, right? And if that's only true if they're willing to and actively participating in the therapeutic intervention. If you refuse to do the therapeutic intervention, you're not playing. For the second offense, and these are not nicotine, this is anything but nicotine. We have a little bit different rules they wanted for nicotine. You would miss 20% of the regular season, whatever's left. And if the season ends prior to the consequences served, it would carry over to the next season played by the student athlete. So let's say Mr. Hudson is a wrestler and all he does is wrestle and he tests positive and we only got 10% of the suspension in, he would start off the next year with 10% of the suspension in wrestling. Now, but if he ran track, it could carry over into track and cancel it out there. They also wanted it to be that you either but we're still letting kids practice and dress out. We still want them to be part of something versus ostracizing them. And then must provide a clean test or trending down to return to play. And the reason we said trending down is because by the time you get the next test, some of these things stay in your system a really long time. And they can tell from the test whether or not it's been a recent usage or it's something that they're still testing positive from where they were in a car with somebody who smoked marijuana. Third offense, with non-nicotine, they wanted a 365 calendar day suspension from all VHSL events to include practices. So basically they're saying if you fail this test 3 times, and we're not talking about nicotine, we're talking about one of the other drugs, it's not helping you. You're not learning your lesson. So I know we're going to talk about therapy in a few minutes, but we also ramp up the type of therapy and how our intervention is going to be your first time versus your second time versus your third time. And we also are going to do a substance abuse assessment before we decide how many sessions and all that thing. That will all be personalized. And then the fourth offense, if you do it 4 times, you just can't ever play. You're done. So nicotine was a little different. The first offense is the same. That basically you miss the next game, but you can practice and dress out. For the second offense and anything after that with nicotine, they basically said that you just missed 10% of the regular season. So then if you miss 10%, you get called again during that season. Well, now you're missing the rest of the 10% forever in perpetuity, but they would not ever like go 365 or kick a kid off for nicotine. All right. The other thing to remember is if a student tests positive, let's say that Mr. Hudson tests positive in wrestling. Okay, let me switch it off. Dr. White is sorry, Brent. If Dr. White,
Must be a history here.
I should have used performance enhancing drugs to make it believable. Anyway, if Dr. White was caught during wrestling with marijuana, he would be included in the subsequent test as long as he was participating for a calendar year, even if it was a different sport. Because we're really trying to help people stay clean is the goal, and to make sure they're getting the therapy they need. So when would it be considered a positive test or consequences? A confirmed test by the MRO. Refusing to participate if you were tested. I will say, when I've done this before, I did have a kid say, well, I'm not on this team. And the kid just removed himself from the team because he knew he was going to test positive. That would be a positive test. Leaving school without proper documentation after being selected to provide a sample. So basically the way it works is you put it in, they randomly generate who gets tested. The AD will get that list probably the day before. If the kid's at school that day, because we don't allow cell phones, but if they start calling or texting or doing whatever, and they leave school and they don't have proper documentation, that's considered a positive test because they're basically avoiding being tested. And then if they tamper with the specimen, so like if a kid brings in some kind of bag with urine in it and tries to do that, it's sad, but it does happen. Notification of testing results. We would develop a procedure to right away inform the parents or guardian of the positive test and what are the next steps. The next steps would include obtaining a consent form for therapeutic intervention. We could, if you guys decide to do this, we would iron this out, but I definitely think there should be a meeting between the AD, the coach, the parent, and the kid. So basically talking about what was discovered, what are the therapeutic interventions, what's the commitment, and doing all those things. And then, Sean, I'm going to ask you to jump in here and help me on this. So I really worked with Sean to develop therapeutic interventions because the committee recommended for the pilot at least that we use our life counselors who are certified counselors who all can provide therapy for substance abuse. We start there before we go outside, but in the budget request, I did include extra money in case we needed somebody that might need more intensive supports. So, you want to take over?
Sure. So for the nicotine piece for violation number 1, we would use research-based materials. So what we've looked at is the Stanford Medicine Research Lab. It's a vape-free curriculum. There would be 5 modules that our students would participate in, and then it would be overseen by our life counselors with some follow-up with them on the content of the education. So the goal of that curriculum would be to help our students to understand the risk of harm for vaping, to help them to understand the marketing strategies that are used all of the time to encourage vape use, which causes our kids to become addicted. We would help them to gain some skills on how to refuse vape materials. But ultimately, the idea would be to help them reduce their use and then ultimately prevent any future use. And so that would be for violation number 1. And then violation number 2, if it happens again, we would also have mandatory participation in a life counseling group. And we would focus on different things using evidence-based materials. Some of those materials that we've looked at, one of them is called BOTFN. It's a life skills training. There's about 40 years of peer-reviewed research on this program. It is one of the programs that's often used in a school environment with students that are using. The research for this program shows that if kids really focus on 3 main skills, then their use of doing risky behaviors decreases. And so those skills are drug-resistant skills, helping them to recognize and challenge common misconceptions about tobacco, alcohol, and other substances. Personal self-management skills, helping them to work on their behaviors, helping them to learn how to work on goals, again, risk of harm, how the choices of their substances impact them currently with what they're doing, and then also how it can impact them in the future. And then just with decision-making skills. We need to help our young people understand that they come in contact with lots of tough choices, but they can make healthier choices for themselves. And then the last area is just generalized social skills to help them to learn how to communicate effectively and how to refuse when a peer comes to them and offers substances, teaching them how those skills to be able to do that. Let's see. And then the next piece for students that are using substances other than nicotine, we'll have the licensed life counselor do a substance assessment. The substance assessment will help us to understand whether or not a student has a high probability of a substance use disorder. If it's basic experimentation, education is the key, and that's where we can actually provide a program. One of the evidence-based programs is called Teen Intervene. It's a combination of cognitive behavioral therapy, motivational interviewing, and stages of change for the adolescent. So we would do an initial assessment followed by 3 individual sessions with the student to work on them on skills. If they had a second violation, then we would also do a mandatory participation in a life counseling substance group. And there we can use research-based materials and provide more intensive interventions and strategies for our students. Each one of the assessments that would be done for a student that's using a substance other than nicotine, if we identify that there's a high probability that the student has an addiction or a substance use disorder, we would certainly handle that on a case by case. Because what we know is that we do have some students that are addictive and they need intensive outpatient programs.
Which is why I added the extra $30,000 roughly to the budget request in case we needed support to help kids. So the committee's recommendation was that they said you guys should approve a pilot for next school year using this information as a guide to develop the final program, but also to evaluate whether or not this program is even effective. So eventually, if you guys say yes, and I'll just be honest with you, I would not request you all to vote on this tonight, because this is the kind of thing that I think you would want to hear from, give community members a chance to chime in. And at the end of the day, let's say I just want to say, if you guys do say yes, we want to move forward, then we would just have to start the RFP process. We'd have to iron out all the details. I'd get a team together here to iron out all the specific details. We'd create a communication plan with Chuck's help, including a Roanoke County Public Schools student random drug testing booklet that would have all the information that we would share with every athlete during meetings before their season starts. So, and that's all I have. So it's pretty much information.
Questions or comments?
I think I'll throw out a couple comments if that's all right.
Sure.
And first off, thank you so much, Dr. Soltis, and to the committee for all the diligent work in looking into this issue. I think it does highlight the need for us to be both looking at and figuring out how to address substance use disorder in students, because it is a problem, and that's why we're talking about it. I think as you pointed out, these articles are not necessarily meant for the layman. They're written in archaic ways, and research articles are definitely difficult to interpret. But the consensus across all 3 is that there's not the evidence to support drug testing as an effective tool for what our goals are, which is to support healthy decision making and prevention of substance use in the students. I think the one that offered probably the most insight into what we could do was the one from the American Academy of Pediatrics that pointed out the strength and power in school-wide preventative education and having a trained mental health counselor dedicated to offering intervention for individuals that were identified. And I think they even pointed out in there that for about the same cost to run a small program like this for a moderate-sized high school would support the salary of a mental health provider. So that's something for us to consider. I think that article also did a good job highlighting some of the potential risks from a medical side. And unfortunately, I'm privy to a lot of what goes on in the community out there in my professional work. And some of the things these articles pointed out is data did suggest that while they may have decreased cannabis use during the window where they were being tested, there was evidence that they were diverting to more illicit drugs that weren't on that panel. or synthetics that aren't on that panel. And unfortunately, the one of the big things we see in our area, vape shops where they're getting vapes, they're getting THC vapes, they're also selling dangerous substances that are not regulated, herbals of various things. Kratom's a big thing on our radar right now that does not get routinely tested. You can test for it. It's going to cost you a pretty penny, and it's not worth testing it on a wide scale. So I think that the drug test piece of it is not necessarily addressing the goals that we've set out. I think the committee has done a great job at pointing out the goals that we need to focus on, though, and I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I too would like to thank the committee for volunteering their time and energy in exploring this issue. Got some concerns as to whether an educational piece may be more beneficial, and trying to make sure these kids understand that we care about them, not just when they're athletes in our schools, but we care about making sure that they understand this is something they shouldn't do once their season's over or once they're out of high school, or the piece to try to keep them, educate them in that this really is not good for them is important. So, and I wonder if 10%, if we're just testing 10%, is that enough of a deterrent? And I heard $53,000, but I can't imagine that's just the drug testing alone. That's not going to be any cost for counseling services or therapeutic intervention or anything along those lines.
So the therapeutic intervention would be provided by our in-house life counselors that we already have on staff. And then the extra, because I think I put it in at $90-something thousand in the budget request. That $30,000 would be towards if we had some kid that needed intensive supports.
Yeah, so you were talking 53,000 and 30,000, if I heard correctly.
Yes.
Right.
So basically, the 53,000 is basically for.
Yeah, not 153, I think.
Yeah, it's 53,000 for just the testing, the 10%, and it would be 10% of each activity, not 10% total. I didn't do a very good job of explaining that. It would be like 10% of the basketball players would get tested during basketball season. 10% of the football players would be tested during football season. Every activity would have 10% tested, not 10% of the entire pool put in together. Okay. Yeah, so I'm sorry, I should have explained that. And that's still in that cost.
Yeah. And I also wonder if it would potentially drive student athletes away from some of those positive role models that we know coaches are very positive role models. Are they deciding not to play or taking them away from those positive role models? Just some concerns.
And I think that's a valid concern, to be honest with you. I mean, I think that the group talked about that. We had a lot of former athletes, former coaches, and they were like me. I was a former athlete. I know it doesn't look like it, but I was at one time. And if I would say, I'm not going to risk my sport because I was passionate about the sport, right? But if you have a problem, you may not say that. But trust me, you're talking to somebody who a coach made the biggest difference in his life. So at the end of the day, yes, I worry about that too.
Well, and I think along those lines, something that we talked about in those committee meetings was there are students that maybe the only reason they're showing up is to play a sport, and you hate to take away. I mean, obviously they're doing something to harm themselves, but at the same time, you do hate the idea of taking something away from them, which is the one reason that they're showing up. So that was a discussion that we had in the meetings. The other thing that stuck with me was that one of the research articles talks about that it doesn't really have an effect on anyone who knows they're not getting tested. So then you wonder, like, what kind of impact are you having truly in the large scheme of things, right? Because those other students will continue to do what they're doing because they know that there's no chance of being tested. So that's a big segment of our schools, right? So that's,
and then we're restricted there by who we are legally allowed
right,
to test.
Right. But the research said that knowing that you're not going to get tested means that you're not affected by the fact that the testing is happening.
Right.
So which makes sense, right? I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
That's about all.
Okay.
I've got a question. So Dr. White brought up a good point. Substances such as kratom, which is terrible, and I've witnessed people get hooked on that. And I mean, they go through withdrawals like opioids.
Yes.
I mean, it's terrible. So I know they consistently change these formularies. I mean, are these tests kept up to date to where they, if kids are using these, because we know that the majority of our kids are using substances that they're getting at gas stations,
Right.
versus heroin or meth and things like that. So are these tests viable for those? I mean, you may know that from your.
Yeah, and generally speaking, when we want to test specifically for a lot of these newer synthetics or herbal compounds, we have to specifically do an add-on to whatever we're running. These typical panels that they're using for urine drug screens will not have those on there.
See, that would bother me because I feel like that the most of our kids, because it's the accessibility of it. You know, anybody anymore. I mean, it shouldn't be this way, and I wish legislation would do something in Richmond instead of trying to make everything legal. You know, maybe do something about this stuff. But we know it's affecting our kids. I mean, they're getting the vapes, they're getting all this THC, they're getting the stuff from these local shops. So, if we're just going to test for this stuff, we're completely overlooking what pretty much 99% of what we're finding in the schools. We're just overlooking it. So I'm not so sure that that's the best route. Spending $100,000 and we're really not, or 53 and 30, whatever it would be, but we're really not testing for what we know everybody's using.
And it sounds like that's expensive to test for.
It is typically expensive to test for. And I think one of these pointed out that too, like you get a false sense of, okay, we're on the right track of what we're doing because you're missing some of these things.
Right.
And from what I've read, some of these things, I mean, they literally act like opioids, like kratom, what you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I may be missing the entire point of what we're doing here. If we're going to the point of saying we just spent probably 4 or 5 months with this committee of what I would consider experts or folks, you know, just like when we did the phone, even though we didn't have many in that said we should allow phones in the high schools, we went with what they recommended. So we have this committee that says they feel like we should start this pilot program. $90,000 in the scope of $180 million, whatever our budget is peanuts. And we've got SAC, the kids that actually, a group that's of kids that are bought in, good kids that are bought into all of our schools, that says in a 27 of 28 vote that we should pilot this to try it. We have the committee that says 7-3 that's been a part of this for 4 or 5 months of putting this together. We just did, this is going off topic, but we just did a 10 committee group for recommendations on our CTE committee, which we listened to and we should have listened to, and we should have took their recommendations. We have not a punitive, we're not trying to crush the kid. This is a rehabilitative thing. We want to help these kids, right? We don't want to, the committee, if what I'm hearing is, that was a big concern. They do not want to crush these kids, you know, like let's get rid of them after the first one. Let's get rid of them after the second one. You know, let's work with them. We have Dr. Hughes who says that her group can help and facilitate the responses to these kids. $90,000 is the cost to try a pilot program, just to try it and see if it is something that, you know, we've heard from committee members that were athletes that said, look, if they'd have had this, they wouldn't have done this at a party or wouldn't have done that at a party because of the threat of this. Again, I don't know, but I'm listening to what they're saying. And Dr. Hughes, I'd like to hear your comments as to what, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but am I wrong? I mean, should we not test pilot this? Or?
I think ultimately it's a board decision.
Yeah.
I think for us to identify kids that are struggling and being able to target them directly with therapeutic interventions is a good thing, right? We want to help kids,
Right.
particularly while they're in the school environment before they turn 18 and move on with their life. So, I mean, ideally, we would have kids reach out for help. But I think what we all know is it happens in all different types of ways. So if we can identify kids in whatever way in order to be able to provide supportive services, I think that that's a good opportunity.
Thank you. And so my thought was, and we know from our closed sessions, I don't know if all of them, but in the last 6, 8, 10 months, 85, 90%, I'm just throwing this number out because I obviously don't have a quantifiable exactly, but I would say 80, 85% of the kids that came through were vaping. And y'all know that I ask every time, are you addicted? Do you have a problem? What can we do to help you? How can we help? We want you to succeed. We want you to help you. And then we get a program here, and I'm just going off what comments I'm hearing and kind of frustrated, shaking my head as to why we would tell this committee that we know better than you, that we entrusted you to come up with this idea and come up with a pilot plan. So, I'm not gonna go crazy on it, but I want to help our kids, and I've got 5 grandkids that are going to come through these programs. I don't know if they'll be athletes or not, but they're trending, and I would be ultra supportive of this program personally. Again, this is just my personal belief and opinion, but to go against the committee's recommendation and $90,000, again, that's a lot of money, but in the scope of 100, I forget what we have, 200 million, whatever our budget is, it seems like peanuts to take this opportunity to do a pilot project. And how do you identify these kids if you don't have some kind of testing program? I mean, do you just go in there and pick them out? Hey, I think you're using. Let's try and help you. If we don't know that, but we're gonna.
I was actually wondering, if, Dr. Hughes, if you put you on the spot here a little bit, just because those of us who've been around a while and know the history of like our life counselor program, I think it might be useful for the board, the public, just to kind of know some background just real briefly about that. Because it actually started off as our substance abuse program, and then we expanded that and turned full blood mental health. But you might just kind of give us the brief summary of what that role is currently, what it has been, and to Mr. Greenway's point, how do we help kids or identify them currently?
Sure. So in the past, we had a student assistance program, and they were primarily the counselors were focused on students that were identified that had substance issues. There was a 2-day program for students that had policy violations where they attended sessions. Nancy Hans was a part of that as well. Students and their parents, and they received psychoeducation related to substance use, prevention, resources, things like that. So they attended a number of sessions, and they were monitored on a regular basis through that program. Then we switched over to life counseling, and that had more of a mental health focus. So we, our clinicians there focus on mental health issues as well as substance issues. However, the difference is with the student assistance program, students were seen by counselors because they were identified through policy violations or court violations that came to the attention of the school. Whereas with our life counseling program, it would require a student to either self-refer that they're struggling with a particular issue, or through our policy violations where they get caught, and they can also have some either individual time with the counselor or see an outside counselor for intervention.
And we wouldn't quit that, right? We wouldn't quit that. Of course not. So that would still be ongoing.
Right.
This is not
This is just an additional opportunity if you choose to do so through the athletic piece to identify kids, and an opportunity to provide that therapeutic intervention.
Thank you.
Well, Tim, I'm not opposed to it, and I have no doubt that our staff would do a wonderful job at helping our kids get back on track. What concerns me is are we going to be testing for these substances that they have so much access to? Because I feel like that is probably being more abused now than the illegal substances. That's my fear. Is we're testing, but are we testing for the right things?
Well, if we do the pilot program, we'll find out. Is what I would think. And again, or that we either tweak it or we get rid of it, and I
don't know. I mean, I don't know enough about this, and how do we tweak the test to be able to?
It would just probably come at a higher cost, correct?
It does come at a higher cost. You just tell the lab we want to test for this substance, and this substance, and it's usually an add-on unless it's in one of their pre-built panels.
And we could work that in the RFP, basically say what the cost is. I'm just guessing.
And I would be suspicious that we could keep the cost under 90,000 because honestly, if they're getting positives, the standard medical follow-up is to do confirmatory tests, which come with an additional cost to that, which is usually hundreds of extra dollars for each one, and takes time and additional resources there. So
Let's call it 200,000. If it helps our kids, I'm okay with that. And again, a lot of money, and I'm throwing out numbers I have no idea about. But for me, this is all about helping kids and students, and not not looking into what's the motive here, what's the motive there. How's if Dr. Hughes thinks their group can help in the counseling and moving these kids forward, I think there's an opportunity to save some kids. Maybe I'm Pollyanny and just wrong about that, but the thought would be that we can help some kids. And a couple $100,000, again, a lot of money. We're saying 93. Call it a couple $100,000. If it saves some kids, I'm okay with it.
Dr. Hughes, could that vape-free curriculum that you'd mentioned, could that be implemented into a health and PE class?
Yes.
It's not already?
So I do have a question
It is
about
one
that.
of the approved, in health and PE, Kevin Burcham approves a number of different types of programs and allows his teachers to pick and choose. From that, it is one of the materials that's available.
So I'd love to see that be included in the curriculum in some class,
Right, and
so
if-
that everybody's
they
getting
do.
it, not just
The
our
topics
athletes.
included, but they could choose which materials. Is that correct?
That's correct. And then as far as education, we do currently provide education to students. So we do a specific vaping curriculum with our 7th graders and also with our 9th graders and 10th graders. And then we also do a substance use curriculum that we share. Now it's in large groups, so it's not in small groups, which I think would be more effective, but we do provide that substance education.
So that would be kind of my question is if we're talking about the money, which we always have to consider, would we not be better off maybe looking at some other options in terms of educating and spending the money to reach a broader population? I think we all want to help our students. I'm just not sure that this is the best way to go. I mean, like I said, I sat on that committee and I had hundreds of questions. We went back and forth, and one part you thought, okay, we should do this, and then you would ask another question, and think, oh, this doesn't sound right. So it's not. I don't think there's a right answer here. I think this is a very tough decision to make. I'm just thinking, like, on a broader scale, could that money be used in a different way? Like you pointed out the research article. Is there a better way to reach these kids? Can we see what that might look like? I mean, can we see what trying a different avenue, a different program, what would that look like if we were going to put more money towards it? I would just like to see what some other options are before we just dive into this, because I'm not sold on it. I haven't been sold on it from the beginning. Sitting through the committee made it more complicated, I think. It just brought up more questions. So I'm not ready to do this. And so I would like to see what other options we might have and what else could we do that might have a broader impact. That's my thought.
And last thing on my mind, I certainly appreciate that viewpoint as well. And I think if we focus in on the stated goals and commitment of the committee, which is to create a program that seeks to foster a safe and supportive environment where they thrive, help them make healthy choices and enhance their potential, and create a program that's not disciplinary or punitive in nature, I think we can find ways to spend money to help identify and get kids that need help into treatment. And I think there's plenty of opportunities. And the current gold standard recommendation across the addiction medicine world is to use, for early identification, to use a model called SBIRT, which is screening, brief intervention, and referral to treatment. And screening does not involve any lab work. That is a questionnaire asking about patterns of substance use and exposure to identify people. And then those individuals get referred for follow-up assessments and treatment.
Now, is that them or the kids answering those questions in the affirmative?
Correct.
So if they don't answer those questions in the affirmative, they just get missed.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. So you have to ask it in the right fashion. It has to be in an environment where they feel supported and trusted in providing their answers, and that they're not going to be negatively punished for it, and that they're going to get help. So there does require upfront education on the purpose of that.
And so if we don't do this, I apologize to the committee for the time they've spent, but I think it's well worthwhile to do to at least do the pilot. But that's where we're at.
Can we look into the questions that I was asking about?
Other options?
Yeah, just to see
Yeah.
what that would look like. I mean, I think the goal still is obviously to help our students. I think we're all on that same page. I just want more information. I just want some other options. I want to see what that would look like. I mean, we don't have to decide this today, so I want more information, and I'm just wondering if you guys can maybe help with that, and then
I think Sean and I can.
Okay.
Jess.
and then we can kind of go from there.
And how hard would it be to get a price on some of these alternative substances that we're talking about?
I can't hear him.
How much would it wouldn't be hard. I'd just call the same company I called last time.
I think you need to know that because you can't discriminate and say, well, I'm going to test you on these different panels and somebody else has to be the same.
Right. So it's going to be across the board.
Yep.
So.
I just need to know.
And that's ever changing though too, right? So how does that work?
I don't mean to cut you off. I don't know what
Right.
drugs you
you
guys
wanna
or no one
test.
would be the ones that you want
Well, and
to see
that's
on the
not. I
panel.
think it would change though, right? It's going to.
Well, it would I mean, yeah, obviously every year.
It's going to be a constant shift in what that would look like, I guess. But I guess we could get some idea of what it would cost.
Right, like the kratom or whatever you called it.
Yeah.
I'll reach out to you guys and say, hey, Dr. Blake, Brent, y'all see it a lot as far as what the substances are, right? So just if y'all can give me like what they are, I can contact the companies and say, hey, if we did this standard panel, but we also wanted to add this, this, and this, what would it be per test?
Sure.
I can do that, and we can also explore other options.
Any other?
I also have to add one thing, if you don't mind. I mean, to your point about the committee doing work, I mean, I appreciate you as a board being willing to, have a committee to look into a topic. These are not easy problems, so it's okay to wrestle with ideas that are hard and to, take time to actually hear the recommendation and the report. I think that's very important. If we're going to ask a committee to do work, then let's hear their recommendation. So I appreciate you at least being willing to do that and wrestle with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Try to figure it out.
Yeah, it's not easy. Any other questions or comments about this or anything else? All right, meeting adjourned.